Chapter 4473. It wasn't anyone else who was quietly lying in the coffin, it was Taro Supreme. He had a handsome face, his nose was dangling, his eyes were closed, and a pair of sword eyebrows flew straight to the horns, and the whole man was full of sharpness. At first glance, he seemed to be not sleeping, but sleeping. Buzz tilde. At this moment, the Taro Excalibur shook to the extreme. Jian Wushuang froze slightly. He did not expect that Tai Luo Supreme was so young. No wonder it is as strong as Wu Zhenxian, all dumped for it. Jian Wushuang can already imagine that Tai Luo Supreme relied on the sword to stretch his face, and the chic appearance of drunkenness in the world would surely make countless people fall over. So arrogant. Jian Wushuang shook his head and felt regretful. Elder Wind, what's next? Elder Moose Wind glared at him and snorted. Mist Shuang, don't you put the words of this seat in your ears. This seat thought you had hard wings, so you don't need the discipline of this seat. What are you doing now? Come and ask me how to refine the corpse. Jian Wushuang heard this, pretending to laugh. Elder Moose, you laughed. Where can I dare not accept your discipline, but I am always greedy and want the best of everything. Well, greed is not enough to swallow elephants. This sentence, I have told you several times. Elder Moose Wind shook his head, and then sighed softly. Well, if you try it. This seat will now teach you the method of corpse refining. Having said that, Elder Moose Wind flicked his fingers, a glaucoma suddenly burst out, and fell into the heart of Jian Wushuang's eyebrows. Immediately, a method of how to make corpses was opened in Jian Wushuang's mind. This method is not complicated or complicated. The most important thing is that through virtual force, you must first reach the divine corpse to make a painstaking connection, then input instructions to make it obedient, and finally refine it day and night to make it thoroughly keep it for your own use. Jian Wushuang turned around and sat down with his back to the Elder Wind, knees slowly closed, and his face was pensive. This corpse refining method is not very complicated, for Jian Wushuang, but if you look at it briefly, you can get through. But its biggest difficulty is that Jian Wushuang has no virtual power at all. The key to this set of corpse refining methods is also the most basic thing, that is, it is necessary to first refine the corpse and then make a connection. You can only try with divine power. Jian's eyes flashed for a while, and then he made a decision in his heart. Theoretically, divine power and imaginary power are both derived from an energy in the universe, which should not be a problem. Do it when you think of it. Jian Wushuang's hands blasted out, and a sudden force of magic, like a river flowing from his palm like a tide, penetrated into the body of Tai Luo Supreme. In a short time, the sword waistcard of Jian Wushuang jumped, and a psychedelic power poured out. From the outsider's perspective, the magic power of Jian Wushuang suddenly became no different from the virtual force. Really go for refining? Elder Feng's brows jumped, and his face was chaotic. Shuang shuang, shuang shuang, this seat is waiting for you to have a grey nose, and a grey face is looking for this seat. Shaking his head, Elder Moose began to observe sword unparalleled. Laugh. Jian Wushuang's divine power, as soon as he entered the body of Tai Luo Supreme, felt an extremely powerful obsession. This obsession is like a hedgehog who is fully armed and does not allow anyone to invade. However, when Jian Wushuang's divine power touched Tai Luo Supreme's obsession, in a moment, the obsession collapsed. The call of the Supreme Lord in Jian Wushuang's mind disappeared, like a nerve that had been strained for a long time, and at this moment it finally broke off. Jian Wushuang understands that the former Tai Luo Supreme has been waiting for someone who is not in this universe to take away his corpse. He was so glorious in his lifetime that he never wanted to be a puppet in the hands of someone in another universe. He raised a line puppet to attack the native universe he was guarding. Now he's waiting. Jian Wushuang is the most suitable person for him and the person he wants to wait for most. Jian Wushuang didn't say a word silently. At this moment, he finally realized something. How sad and how worthy of the martyrs who died in the extraterritorial battlefield to protect the universe. Refining was smoother than Jian Wushuang imagined. Without any obstacle at all, Jian Wushuang completed the refining step by step. In a short time, the dim and faint corpse of Tai Luo Supreme God began to gradually light up. What? Elder Moose Foam was shocked, his eyes widened, and his face flashed with dullness. This corpse has been refined by this boy. The elders of our 5 elders, together with the suzerain, are helpless corpses of gods, so they were easily refined by this boy. Elder Moose's mouth widened gradually to be able to put an egg, and the whole person was lost. Boom boom. A ray of golden light continued to shine from Taro's supreme corpse. Feet, hands. The next moment, a golden light suddenly shot from Tai Luo Supreme. Boom tilde. An earth-shattering explosion spread, and the endless corpse gas rose into the sky, forming a billowing black cloud. Taro Supreme opened his eyes suddenly. However, in his eyes, there was nothing pleasing, a stiffness and numbness. Jian Wushuang tried to enter a command in Taro Supreme, and Taro Supreme raised his hand. Wow! Instantly, Tai Luo Supreme raised his right hand. Then, Jian Wushuang tried to make Tai Luo Supreme Corpse perform other complicated actions, and it suddenly became stiff and obscure. It seems that only continuous refinement can truly make Tai Luo's Supreme Corpse, such as arm instructions. There was a smile on the corner of Jian Wushuang's mouth. Still, his heart was overjoyed. Too extreme. This is undefeated in all battles. In the universe, it has won a great reputation, it has awe-inspiring universe, and it has swept across 9 days and 10 places. Such an existence, at this moment, was even refined by the sword unparalleled sword, and became a corpse under his control. It can be said that Jian Wushuang's strength, at this moment, has soared in general. And this is not the real ecstasy of Jian Wushuang. The reason for Jian Wushuang's real ecstasy is that he did not let Tai Luo Supreme fall into the hands of these aliens in the universe. To Tai Luo Supreme, Jian Wushuang is respected from the bottom of his heart. It can be said that Jian Wushuang has gone all the way to now, because the existence of Supreme Master Luo has helped him tremendously. Regardless of whether it is a Tara sword or a Tara sword code, in the crisis of mortal death again and again, the danger is around, and the Jedi fights back. Jian Wushuang was extremely respectful to Tai Luo, from beginning to end, still holding a grateful heart. For most of the reasons, he used Taylor Supreme as the corpse, because he did not want to see Taylor Supreme lying alone here, and then did not know when he would wait until the obsession disappeared gradually and was refined by people in this universe. Disaster. This is not happening now. He will make Tai Luo Supreme, who has fallen, rebloom his glory in the universe. Chapter 4474, Puff. With the instruction of Jian Wushuang, Tai Luo Supreme stepped out of the coffin, walked in the air, and landed behind Jian Wushuang, like a shadow following the shadow. Jian Wushuang slowly opened his eyes and glanced at the glorious glance of Tai Luo Supreme. Mist Shuang, did you really refine him? Elder Moose's eyes widened and asked inconceivably. I guess it should be. Jian Wushuang smiled slightly and replied. Elder Moose heard the news, and could not help but feel lost, and then gave a bitter laugh, shook his head and said, Is this the treatment of genius? I waited for the elder 5 elders and the corpse that the master could not refine, in your hands. It was so easy to be refined. Mist Shuang, I will report to the suzerain later. Let's go, I will take you back to your dormitory now. It is good. Sword Wushuang nodded. Subsequently, Jian Wushuang followed behind the Elder Wind, and swept away toward the palace. Tai Luo Supreme returned to the coffin and was held up by the sword unparalleled. Along the way, many practitioners of the refining gods who were sitting cross-legged on the ground practicing their cultivation, raised their eyes to see the Elder Wind Elder and Sword Wushuang passing by in the air, and their eyes were full of surprise. Immediately, a murmur of discussions rang from the mouth of the disciples of Lian Shunzong. I heard that this time the introductory disciple selection, we have a talent that can be compared with the disciples of our ancestors who practiced the divine sect. They were taken away by Elder Moose on the spot, but this person? It should be what I want. Elder Moose is really fond of him. I neglected a series of tedious steps and took him to the coffin mountain to select the corpse. The coffin that was held behind this person just now should have been picked by this person in the coffin hill. I never saw that coffin, and I don't know which corpse is inside. The discussion sounded, and everyone was a little curious. At this moment, an extremely experienced disciple of Shunzong, looking at the coffin raised behind Jian Wushuang, His pupils narrowed sharply, as if he found something, and screamed in shock. This is the first coffin placed on the top of the coffin here. This corpse in the coffin can't be refined even by the Lord Sovereign, but was obtained by this person? When this remark came to an end, it suddenly felt like a stone stirred up 1,000 layers of waves. Almost all the disciples flashed an unbelievable color in their eyes, and their faces turned dull. Who does not know the legend of the Coffin Mountain in the refining deities? As a result, the news of Jian Wushuang refining the corpse of the first coffin sacrifice spread wildly, shaking with enthusiasm. Without both sides of the sword, they set foot on refining Shenzong, and became famous. The size of the refining Shenzong is far beyond the imagination of Jian Wushuang. It may seem like a mountain peak, but in fact, it is much larger than a few starfields. Fortunately, both Elder Moose Wind and Jian Wushuang Xiu are not low. Under the leadership of Elder Moose Wind, they soon arrived at the palace of Jian Wushuang. There, it is a tall stone mountain. The architecture of the entire mountain is somewhat similar to a honeycomb. On the mountain wall, it is full of dense, potty black caves. Elder Wind said, "Mist Shuang, this is the place where ordinary disciples who practice Shenzong live and practice, also known as corpses. The corpses are full of power and vitality. They can help you practice and refine the corpses. There is also a great benefit to warming up the dead body. It seems that the elders of the Moose Wind and the Sword Unparalleled have been sensed, and many disciples of the refining gods have come out of the corpse hole. Their faces were pale, their eyes were empty, and the whole man was filled with a gloomy atmosphere. See Elder Wind 2. When these disciples saw that they were the elders of Moose Wind, they immediately saluted. "You're welcome." Elder Moose Wind nodded slightly at them, and sent them back. Later, Elder Moose continued to say to Jian Wushuang, "Let's go, I'll take you to the top of the mountain, and I remember that there are just a few top corpses in there." Having said that, Elder Moose raised his sword Wushuang, stepped on it, and disappeared in place. When it appeared again, it was already on the top of the mountain. There are not many corpses on the top of the mountain. There are only 9 corpses. They are not densely packed like the bottom of the mountain and the mountainside, but each corpse is at least 100 miles away, and it is unprecedentedly huge. A strong body of corpse seemed to have condensed into the essence. Blowing his nose from the corpse hole, Jian Wushuang could not help but feel a little discomfort, and frowned. Seeing this, Elder Feng nodded with satisfaction, and smiled. "Well, Sword Unparalleled, you go in. Remember, in the face of the corpse of God, do not have any insults, you should respect. They will the most trustworthy person in your world, even the closest relative, is still there. Finally, you have to take a rest for a few days these days. This seat is now going to report the situation like the suzerain. After this time, this seat will pick you up and meet the suzerain." After speaking, Shamoran's sleeve robe waved and Shashiran went. Jian Wushuang took a deep breath and walked towards the corpse hole step by step. The corpse hole looks simple, but in fact there is no other hole in it. When Jian Wushuang stepped in, he felt a strong void and corpse. There was a hall, a palace, a practice room, and so on. The candles made from the dragon grass are never extinguished, and the burning smoke can help people to rest in peace while practicing. Jian Wushuang did not rest in a hurry, but placed the coffin of Tai Luo Supreme respectfully, and began to inspect the corpse hole inch by inch to see if there was a similar surveillance ban. After confirming everything, Jian Wu both breathed a sigh of relief, banged at the door, and cut off all his breath. At midnight, a round of demonized blood moons hung high in the sky, and the low roar of the corpse Xiaoye continued to be heard in Xianshan's corpse cave. It is located inside one of the 7 corpses on the top of Shiyang Mountain. Jian Wushuang sat cross-legged on a stone bed calmly thinking. The candles made from the scented dragon scent continued to melt and burn, and a hint of green smoke rose. Speaking of it, until now, he still hasn't fully figured out how he passed the test of the test bedrock yesterday, and achieved an appalling qualification. He remembered that the scanning power of the test bedrock at that time had begun to recede, and almost the next step would be a warning sound similar to that when the ram tested the bedrock. At that moment, the seal of the 3 snakes on his neck suddenly loosened. Then, The testing and scanning power of the trial cornerstone was introduced into the seal of the three-headed snake. That is to say, I can pass the test and have achieved the superb qualification of refining Shenzong. Thanks to Liu Liu, Jian Wushuang murmured to himself, could not help but feel a little dumb. Chapter 4475. Moon stars are rare and corpses raw. After a while of contemplation, Jian Wushuang spread his divine power again and found that no one was nearby, and gently pulled the token given by Ju God from his waist with his right hand. This token can not only cover the breath of divine power on him, but also communicate with the of the universe across the universe and report the situation. Alas! I saw a ripple like a water mirror suddenly on the token. Immediately, I heard a mild and slightly worried voice. "How are you, Jian Wushuang?" Immediately, the lens was swiped up, and the face of Ju God appeared in the water mirror. There is no change in his appearance, but there is more fatigue in his eyes. I do need to guess and guess, this time, the of the universe must work hard. Going back to the of the universe, I have officially entered the refining God sect. Wu Jianshou stepped back a few steps and arched his hands toward the of the sky. "Oh, have you entered the refining sect?" God Ju heard the words, his face flashed with a slight surprise, and said, "Before, the Ram Supreme returned to the old man and said that you went to participate in the selection of the refining deities, but it turned out that he couldn't care about you and had to escape first. The old man thought you had run away." Wu Jianshuang heard the words, could not help but grin, and shook his head. "It's a long story." Immediately, Jian Wushuang spoke sharply and said, "Master God, then it seems that the Ram Supreme is all right?" The of the water in the token water mirror nodded and replied, "Yes, the old man has made contact with the Ram Supreme and the Ice Supreme. Both of them have nothing to do and have escaped from the pursuit of the refining gods." Morocco Supreme? Escape from hunting? Wu Jianshuang heard a sneer in his heart. This guy didn't even come to participate in the selection of Shenzong, why talk about escaping the hunt? He shook his head, and Jian Wushuang did not intend to explain this to the of the universe, but Shen asked, "Master God of the universe, what about the Supreme Spirit Jade?" "Lingyu Supreme." After a moment of silence, the god of Wuzhou said, "The old man tried to contact him many times, but unfortunately he didn't respond. I was afraid that he had been secretly executed by Lian Shenzong." "Is that so?" Wu Jianwushuang sighed slightly. Lingyu Supreme gave him a good impression, but he could not escape the magic palm of the refining god. Jiu Jian Wushuang speculated in his heart that I was afraid that it would not take long before he could see Lingya's Supreme corpse in the coffin. It is just that he has taken away Tyro Supreme, and if he takes Lingyu Supreme again, they are all aliens and will inevitably be suspected. After sighing for a while, Jian Wushuang revealed his recent situation to the gods of the universe and Pan. When the god of Ju heard that Jian Wushuang saw Tai Luo Supreme in the coffin hill, Yun Qing's face always had a flash of anger. The jerk! The old man also suspected that, even if Tai Luo wasn't the emperor's opponent, he shouldn't have disappeared so quickly, leaving no traces of falling down. "I didn't expect to be sold as a corpse and sold to refine Shenzong." Suddenly, when the god of Ju heard that the supreme corpse of Tai Luo had been taken away by Jian Wushuang from the coffin and the refining of the coffin, his face slowly eased. Looking at Jian Wushuang's eyes, he turned into satisfaction and comfort. Afterwards, the two talked a few more words. God Ju instructed Jian Wushuang to take precautions while refining Shenzong. "This is the most important thing. Second, let Jian Wushuang be able to protect himself without taking risks under the circumstances. Try to inquire about the virtual universe's combat deployment against their universe, and the people who previously attacked the universe, which side of the virtual universe belongs to it. There is also a crack node in the void that they passed through, and the native universe they entered." After a while, Jian Wushuang ended the call with the of the universe. Howl. In the Yanxian Mountains, the sound of the corpse watching the moon and howling, as the night gradually deepens, the frequency becomes higher and higher, and then dawn and dawn gradually disappear. The next morning. Alas! A powerful knocking sounded outside the door of the corpse hole where Jian Sword Wushuang was located. "Okay." Wu Jianshou narrowed his eyes, waved his right hand, waved a prohibition, and said lightly, "Please come in." Soon after the sound of the words fell, I saw a scarred dummy with a sickle head entering from the corpse hole. Mist Shuang, why are you so cautious? This is refining Shenzong, and you need to arrange so many restrictions. A sound of laughter sounded. Xu Shi's sickle head narrowed, his eyes narrowed, meaning he looked at Jian Wushuang inexplicably. Elder Shen sickle. Wu Jiansu looked calm and saluted him slightly. This man was the one who wanted to kill him outside the gate of Lian Shenzong Mountain. Elder Shenxian visited suddenly. Is there anything wrong? Wu Jiansu said faintly. He can feel a little hostility on this elder sickle. Mist Shuang, can't you come to visit if this seat is all right? Elder Shen sickle looked at Jian Wushuang up and down, his mouth slightly raised upward. I came to see you this time. One is to see how you are doing. The other is to come and tell you a message. What news? Wu Jiansu asked lightly. There was a faint flash of light in the eyes of Elder Shen, and then he said, Mist Shuang, do you remember the people who accompanied you? One of them has been arrested and executed. When he said this, Elder Shen sickle stared at Jian Wushuang, wanting to see anything unusual from Jian Wushuang's face. However, he was disappointed. Wu Jianhuang's expression was calm from the beginning to the end, without the slightest rhetorical question. Oh, what does that have to do with me? Elder Wu Sickle did not speak, but looked at Jian Wushuang deeply. Only half a while later, he only smiled and said, It doesn't matter, this seat just came to inform you, it's just a pity that the man didn't reveal half a minute of other news before he died, and finally broke out. Elder Shen said as he shook his head, as if booing. Wu Jianshuang did not answer, but just looked at Elder Shen sickle. Okay, Wu Shuang, since you are fine, then this seat will go first. Oh yeah, I almost forgot, I forgot to congratulate you and refined our first corpse of Shenzong. Hey, the strong obsession in this corpse, even the 5 elders. There is no way for the monarch and the master to be able to refine it so smoothly, it is strange. He shook his head, and Elder Shenxian left his corpse with a negative hand. A long time after the Elder Shenxian left. Wu Jianshou slammed the bed with his right hand, his original calm face was instantly gloomy to the extreme. How he couldn't guess, just now the Elder Shenxian pretended to visit him, but in fact, he wanted to catch him and deliberately test it. For this person, he did not believe in his sword unparalleled, and did not believe in the results of the trial. This person must die, otherwise my risk is too great. Wu Jianshou narrowed his eyes and looked at the back of the Elder Shen sickle. Chapter 4476. Elder Godshen sickle must die. It's just that it's difficult to kill him without knowing it, and can't make people doubt him. Wu Jian's eyes flickered, and after thinking for a long time, he could not think of any good way. This matter needs to be considered from a long-term perspective. You must not act recklessly, otherwise you will fail. You will be burned. Wu Jianshou shook his head and said. At the same time, he was slightly relieved in his heart. It was not a bad thing for Elder Shenxian to come to him just now. At least the swordsman now knew that there would be a pair of eyes watching him secretly, so that he would become more cautious in his actions. Alas! The candles in the corpse cave continued to burn, and blue smoke rose up. Wu Jian sat cross-legged, and began to continuously research the weakness, refining Tai Luo Supreme by the way. When he went to the corpse hole, Jian Wushuang knocked side by side, and asked the Elder Shenxian to ask for a book on virtual force. The book detailedly analyzed the structure and analysis of virtual force. Virtual power, like divine power, is an energy between the universe. Essentially, there is no difference between virtual power and divine power, but they are both a means of exerting magical powers, but it is because the laws and rules of the two universes are different, resulting in their particle, atom, electron, and proton structure. There are different changes. That is to say, as long as I can figure out the deepest structure of divine power or virtual force, sort the particles, atoms, electrons, and protons, and regroup the changes, I can convert the divine power into virtual power, or put virtual power is transformed into divine power. Yang Jian's eyes twinkled, thinking quickly in his mind. This is simple to say, but it is extremely difficult to operate in essence. The structural combinations contained in imaginary or divine power are at least billions of times, and the number of combinations they can disrupt again is an infinite number. This is like 100 million permuted numbers. If you want to constantly regroup them, it is best to match a perfect number. It requires effort and is simply an impossible task. Even if I am supreme today, it can take 10 billion times to deduct in one thought, and it will take an extremely long time to get a correct result. Wu Jian's eyes were so bright that he began to think about the feasibility in his head. First of all, the first thing I need to understand is the structural components of virtual force. This requires a lot of effort and time to deduct. Secondly, I have to disrupt all these structural components, and then match the structural components of divine power. Only after the structural components of virtual power and divine power are fully understood, can they try to convert divine power into virtual power. It took me too long to go through the deductions one by one, and now I don't have this time to waste. This refining God Zhongguo is the top gate of the virtual universe. If you want to come to the gate, you should have a similar library. The existence of the cabinet, I might as well go to the library first, to find if there are books about the most primitive structural components of Shu Li. Yang Jianhua's eyes blinked, and he took a deep breath and stood up. The next moment, Jian Wushuang strode out of the corpse hole and swept away towards Shiyang Mountain. Beneath Yanxian Mountain, a voluptuous woman with an enchanting body, wearing cool thin silk and a cat-eared foxtail, was walking out of the corpse hole. Finally broke through Samsung, this enchanting woman stretched her waist and stretched her body. A pair of long, white and straight legs were looming in the silk, combined with the laziness of her face, it was very moving and imaginative. Wow! Suddenly a flash of wind flashed, and the figure of Jian Wushuang appeared in front of her. "Hello, may I ask, where is the library?" Wu Jianshuang asked quite politely. The stunned woman heard the words, her beautiful eyes flowed, she looked at Jian Wushuang and said, "Well, who are you? Why have I never seen you in this Shiyang Mountain?" Wu Jianshuang arched back and said, "Girl, Shiyang Shan, who came only yesterday, is normal if you don't know me." "Oh," the enchanting woman blinked her eyes quite playfully, and then patted her head immediately, shouting, "Ah, I know. Did you just enter the sect recently and have a super qualified Wushuang? You know me?" Wu Jianshou raised his eyebrows. The enchanting woman suddenly pursed her mouth and said, "I senti it. Recently, I was in retreat, and I always heard someone say outside the corpse cave. We have refined the God sect, and came with a talented genius, loved by Elder Wind. It's so noisy that I can't retreat well." "Is that so?" Jian Wushuang smiled slightly and replied, "That's really embarrassing." When I heard Jian Wushuang's regretful words, the enchanting woman seemed a little unhappy and waved her hand. "Okay, it's not your business." After saying that, the enchanting woman's beautiful eyes turned, and said, "Oh, Wushuang, you just said you were going to the library, right?" "Yes." Jian Wushuang nodded. "Oh, Wushuang, this girl kindly reminds you that it is best not to go to the library now." "Huh? Why?" Wu Jianshuang raised his eyebrows curiously. "Don't understand. Not to mention, the girl just mentioned you a few words." The enchanting woman slanted Jian Wushuang at one glance and hummed softly, "Mist Shuang, in our case, there are 6 veins in total. The elders of the 5 elders each have 1 vein, and the suzerain 1. These 6 pulse disciples, on the face of each other, have nothing to do with, but in fact they are their own faction party feathers, secretly fighting continuously. You are brought back from the ancestor by Elder Moose Wind. In theory, you should belong to the Elder Moose Wind. It's just that Elder Moose's pulse is a bit special, because people are thin and hardly a faction, and several disciples under his hands are included in the other 5 pulses. Today's 5 pulse disciples are all gathered in the library at this moment to discuss the Zhongmen Derby issue in the near future. If you go to the library at this moment, you will be caught by the 5 pulse disciples and force you to belong to which one. If you're an ordinary disciple, you just do NT care about which vein you belong to, but now you are carrying the name of unparalleled qualifications. Disciples of 5 pulses will inevitably rob you no matter which pulse you belong to. It is bound to be suppressed by other disciples, so this girl advises you to better avoid this trend now and go to the library in a few days," said the seductive woman. "Is the faction strife in Zhongmen?" Yang Jian Wushuang heard the words and shook his head, "A boring battle. Thank you very much. How do you call a girl? The stunned woman replied with a smile. Hee, you're welcome. You are later in the mists than me, just call me Juicy Sure. Okay, I know. Wu Jianshuang nodded his head after hearing the words, and then asked the specific address of the library to the 9 Musk, stepped on it, and suddenly shot away. Chapter 4477. Within the refining deities, the area is extremely vast. The Dongzong Book Pavilion is quite far away from Xiang Mountain. After half a column of incense, Jian Wushuang saw the palace with an open mouth like an evil ghost. This palace looks spooky, with a black plaque hanging on it, with the 3 characters Hangshukaku written on it. This is the Tibetan Book Pavilion? The style really fits the style of the Shenzong sect. Qi Jian Wushuang couldn't help but be indifferent, immediately shook his head, and walked towards the library. I was quite quiet inside, and no one else existed. I thought that the 5-pulse disciple had not arrived yet. There are countless huge bookshelves in the Dongzong bookshelf. There are densely packed books on the shelves, and there are tens of millions of less. With a movement in Wu Shuang's heart, the divine power spread out and shot towards these books. In the blink of an eye, the contents of thousands of books fell into Jian Wushuang's mind all at once. Jian Wushuang slowly closed her eyes and began to read the contents of these books carefully, looking for an explanation of virtual force. Time passes slowly. 1 hour. 2 hours. 3 hours. Found it. Wu Jian's eyes opened sharply, and there was a flash of magic in his eyes. Alas! Next moment, an ancient yellow book shot backwards from the bookshelf and flew into the hands of Jian Wushuang. The content recorded in this book is truly a search for the most essential and original force of virtual force. The seal has a mark on it, which can indicate who borrowed the book from the library, and Jian Wushuang Jianshu has already arrived. Naturally, there is no need to stay in the library, and turn to walk outside the library. Crackling. As soon as Wu reached the door, Jian Wushuang heard a rush of footsteps. Afterwards, the vision in front of him was covered by dark shadows, and a group of disciples of arrogant Shenzong with different appearances stopped in front of him. They are wearing uniform blood robes. The disciple in the front has a bare head, muscles knotted on his arms, and his upper body is twisted like veins of horror. On his left shoulder, 7 red stars are shining. The light. 7 stars, the counterpart is almost invincible master. Give me some trouble. Wu Jianwu stepped together, holding books, and looked up at the disciples with a calm expression. This group of disciples, walking in the first place, is obviously the leader Xiong Shusha, looking down at Jian Wushuang, and then flashes a strange color in his eyes. For a moment, the corner of his mouth opened a radian. Missed double. Wu Jianshuang nodded his head after hearing the words and said, It's me. Is there anything wrong? The tall and burly Xiong Shusha heard the words, the smile on his face grew stronger, and he stretched out his hand and said, Mist Shuang, Angry Bear, the chief disciple of the elder of Banshan Taishang. I think we can sit and talk. Wu Jiansu looked at him lightly and said, Not interested. As soon as this remark was made, the audience was silent. The smile on the face of the angry bear Shusha was frozen, and the outstretched hand was stiff. Hey, Shuang, our boss invites you personally, don't know me. Mist Shuang, how did you talk to our brother Fury? Mist Shuang, pay attention to your attitude to talking to brother Fury. The angry bear Shusha had not spoken yet, and the disciples behind him could not help but scold. Jian Wushuang frowned when he heard the words, but did not speak. Click. The angry bear retracted his hands, squinted his eyes, and Pai Xiaro did not smile. Mist Shuang, it seems you are not going to give me this face? Wu Jianshu's expression was always indifferent, and he looked at him and said, I'll say it again at last, please let go, you're blocking my way. I saw this fall, and the angry bear's eyes narrowed again, and finally the smile on his face completely converged. I was just about to continue talking. Crackling. Clapping sounded outside the library. Ha ha ha, angry bear, I can't think of you as the chief disciple, who is about to break through the existence of a trace-level virtuoso, and even eaten in the hands of a new student. A chirping sound sounded, and then saw a young man with bone and wings and a thin body, leading a group of people, and strode in. Jichen Bone is too old. The chief disciple of the elder's veins, black-winged Shusha, crackling. I wasn't finished. I saw that there were still 7-star level Shusha, leading the disciples of Lian Shenzong, or expressionless, or slightly sarcastic, and entered with a hand from outside the library. Lan Yu Tai, the elder's chief disciple, Shenyang, Jin Jinya, the elder's chief disciple, Zhang Heng. For a moment, all the disciples of the 4 elder brothers and elders arrived, except for the disciples who practiced the lineage of the sect master. Furious Bear, it looks like your face is not easy to use. People will not look at you at all. Zheng Jinya, the elder's chief disciple, Zhang Heng Shusha, smiled lightly. Immediately, a burst of laughter came. They are in the same vein, and they are constantly fighting in secret. Everyone wants to be a horn-earring person of the younger generation of Shenzong. At this moment, when I see angry bears eating, how can I let this scene of falling rocks down? Humph. The angry bear grunted coldly, his eyes staring at Wu Shuang. His expression suddenly became gloomy. In his eyes, the violent light flickered continuously. Mist Shuang, I finally ask you again, do you not have this face? Said the angry bear coldly. Today, either Sword Warrior surrenders to him, or he will take Sword Warrior. Otherwise, what is his face? Master Wu Shuang, don't hurry to promise, don't worry about him, come to my black wing here, I guarantee you nothing. The black-winged Shusha's eyes flickered, and he said, Master Wu Shuang, come to me, I will take good care of you. Shi Zhangheng Shusha also quickly said. For a moment, everyone gave you a mouthful, and the originally quiet library was suddenly noisy. Noise. Jian Wu Shuang saw this, his eyebrows gradually cooled down, looking at the angry bear blocking him in front of him like a mountain, and only spit out a word. Go. The exit of the word roll suddenly sounded like a thunderous thunder, and the audience was silent. You wanna die. The angry bear burst into rage instantly. Endless powerlessness, condensed in his hands. Seeing everyone else, when I saw this scene, my eyes were instantly frozen. Then, at this moment, Jian Wushuang's right hand had suddenly stretched out at a faster speed, holding the angry bear's neck with one hand. Next moment, Wu Jian lifted the angry bear directly with no force on his hands. With no hands in the sword, he seemed not to be the bear who dominated the refining gods, but a chick who could pinch to death. The angry bear's complexion changed instantly. No matter how he surging vein power, he could not struggle at all. In his terrified gaze, Jian Wushuang's cold voice sounded in his ear. I don't want to participate in your boring game, don't come to death. Chapter 4478. Ha 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 ha. In the library, heavy panting sounds continued to sound. The angry bear was lifted by Sword Wushuang 5 fingers, his neck was lifted, his face suddenly flushed. He kept snarling and roaring, his hands drew on Jian Shou's arms, and his legs continued to move in the air. However, no matter how hard he struggled, Jian Wushuang's 5 slender fingers were shaped like molten iron and could not move at all. Stop it now. Release Brother Fury Bear. The disciples following behind the angry bear suddenly changed his face when he saw this, and opened his mouth and scolded him. The sword has no expression on both sides, and it is ignored. For him now, the angry bear who can't wait for the mark, even if he doesn't use divine power, he can pinch himself by virtue of the physical power brought by the chaos. If Jian Wushuang wanted to kill him, it would be simpler than pinching an ant. Remember, don't mess with me. Jian Wushuang gave him a cold look, and loosened his 5 fingers. Slap. Suddenly, the angry bear fell to the ground with one but, he raised his head and looked up at Jian Wushuang, and his forehead kept seeping out rows of bean-sweat beads. To outsiders, Jian Wushuang seemed to be preemptive and caught him by surprise. But only he knew in his heart what he had experienced that moment ago. Jian Wushuang's glance just now gave him a sense of great horror between life and death. This feeling, such mountain-like pressure, was only on his master, Elder Banshan. Experienced. Flip-flop. Jian Wushuang held the tailored Excalibur sword hilt in one hand and the other with books in his hand and walked out slowly. This guy. The angry bear turned his head to look at Jian Wushuang's back, and his heart was still full of astonishment. His back was already wet with sweat. Brother Fury, would you like to chase? Brother Fury Bear, this person has just entered the refining god sect, so I won't put brother in your eyes. What will happen later? Brother Fury Bear, in my opinion, we must go and teach Wu Shuang a lesson. He is too much for nothing. These disciples said indignantly. To shut up. The angry bear spoke coldly, interrupting the rushing words. A bunch of idiots, don't you see? Even I'm not his opponent, what do you teach others? The angry bear stood up from the ground, took a deep breath and said, this mist is not easy. From now on, you must not provoke him for half a minute. Otherwise, what happened, I can't save you anyway, don't blame me for not remind you in advance. When these disciples heard the words, they couldn't help but stare at each other, opened their mouths and wanted to say something, but at last they didn't say anything, nodded obediently. Let's go. The angry bear shook his head. After such an interruption just now, he had lost his face, so naturally there was no need to stay here more. Wow! A mass disciple followed behind the angry bear. Black-winged Shu Shi, Zhengheng Shu Shi, and other main disciples of the Four Veins could not help squinting. Black wings, it seems that Wu Shuang is not simple. Shenyang Shu Shi said. Well, I'm afraid it's a hard stubble that hides strength. Alas, just one move made the angry bear so scared and respectful. The strength of this misty pair is probably at least the same grade as us. Blackwing Shu Shi nodded and said. Well, no matter what the cultivation of the misty pair is, we don't take the initiative to provoke him, but if he dares to do something secretly, I will make him regret coming to the refining Shunzhou. Zhengheng Shu Shi snorted coldly. Da. Just then, there was a dull footstep outside the door of the library. Here is the line of the suzerain. The three chief disciples of Shenyang, Blackwing, and Zhengheng looked at each other, and their faces were full of dignity. For them, Jian Wushuang is only a small disease, the real enemy is the vein of this master. Alas! Jian Wushuang stepped into the air and quickly flew back to Xiang Mountain. Below Xiang Mountain, the enchanting woman named Ju Shi was still there, and when she saw Jian Wushuang intact, she wondered, Mist Shuang, how are you all right? Have you not met that five-pulse disciple? Jian Wushuang smiled at the words and replied casually, meet them, but they didn't bother me. Ah! Master Wu Shuang, you're in luck. Juicy nodded, and then deliberately raised his face and said, but Master Wu Shuang, you must not care, these five-pulse disciples are not good masters. You are the only super qualified in our case now. Disciple, they will definitely come to you. Well, I see. Thank you. Jian Wushuang persevered a few words casually, and didn't talk too much. He stepped on the ground with his right foot, and suddenly rose into the sky, straight into the corpse hole on the top of the mountain. With a wave of his right hand, the enchantment at the entrance of the corpse cave suddenly started again, and Jian Wushuang stepped into the stone bed and sat down with his knees crossed. Taking a deep breath, Jian Wushuang's divine power poured into the books and began to carefully read the information recorded in the books. In this book, only the approximate formation of virtual forces is recorded. As for the detailed and careful formation of the structure, Jian Wushuang still needs to constantly try to combine. But RAO is so, for Jian Wushuang, it has been a great help. Before, he was like a headless fly, and even if he wanted to disrupt the structure of the divine power and reorder it, he couldn't help feeling it. But the appearance of this ancient book is tantamount to pointing him out. Let's start. Jian Wushuang took a deep breath, slowly closed his eyes, and began to continue in his heart, repeatedly researching and deducing, disrupting the most primitive and original structure in the divine power, and turning it into virtual power. This is a huge project. 1 day has passed. 2 days have passed. In the blink of an eye, half a month passed. In this half-month it was calm and calm, no one disturbed Jian Wushuang's practice, which also made Jian Wushuang completely immersed in the transformation of divine power and power. The dragon's incense candle on the candlestick keeps burning green smoke and never goes out. 1 day after half a month. Found it. Jian Wushuang opened his eyes fiercely, his eyes were covered with bloodshot, but he was not half tired, but exulted to the extreme. The time of 15 days is usually as short as a breath for a practitioner, and it is short enough to be ignored. But for Jian Wushuang, the harvest of these 15 days is huge. For 15 days, Jian Wushuang deduced every minute and every second in his mind, and the effort involved in it could hardly be calculated. Fortunately, he finally found the most critical transition point between divine power and virtual power. Chapter 4479. For the current sword Wushuang, nothing is more important than transforming divine power into virtual power. As long as the divine power is transformed into a virtual power, he can not only find a way to completely hang off the spell power left by Willow, but also he can break through the middle extreme. He has stayed for too long in the elementary supreme realm. As long as he has not yet traveled to the extraterrestrial battlefield, he already has a chance to break through the medium supreme, and when he travels to the virtual universe, he can finally break through the medium supreme. Medium extreme, for him, is just a kick. It was just a breakthrough, but because of such and other things, it was delayed again and again, until after entering this virtual universe, it completely broke the path of Jian Wushuang's breakthrough. In this refining deities, there are many inconveniences to break through after all, and the breath will inevitably leak out. Once the breath is leaked out, it can be said that the calamity is coming. And if he transforms divine power into virtual power, all this naturally no longer needs to worry. As long as he converts divine power into virtual power, he can not only break through the supreme supremacy without worry, but also completely solve the worries of his worries. Even if he fights with others, he will not be exposed to the risks. Start now. Jian's eyes flickered and he extended his right hand. Suddenly, innumerable divine powers poured out from him and turned into a divine orb. Change. Suddenly, the power at the very source of the divine power began to change quietly. Alas! Divine power orbs constantly twist and change, making a clicking sound like glass breaking. The next moment, the entire magic ball exploded. Did it fail? Jian Wushuang narrowed his eyes, but was not discouraged, but after taking a deep breath, the ball of divine power condensed in his hands again. Alas! Located in the deepest place of divine power, which cannot be seen with the naked eye, a trace of protons and electrons separated again, and then reorganized. Jian Wushuang held his breath and stared at the divine power ball held in his palm. Click, click. The divine power twisted and made a sound like glass breaking. This orb of divine power began to flicker, and seemed to be changing in the other direction. This made the sword unparalleled, and there was a rush of joy on his face. However, he hadn't waited for a smile to come out of his mouth. A blast came, and the whole magic ball was broken again. Did it fail again? Jian Wushuang's eyes narrowed. This time, instead of rushing to reunite the ball of divine power, he began to silently reflect on the changes. After a long while, Jian Wushuang took a deep breath and continued the experiment. Failure. Hey. Failure. This cycle continues until 3 more days have passed. A ball of divine power gathered together like the sun suddenly jumped, making a dull wave sound. The next moment, the Jinli Shunli ball trembled violently. Its breath began to move towards an unknown territory. Jian Wushuang stared at this magic ball. He could feel that he was far from successful, but only 1 step away. The surrounding space was madly compressed, and a tiny crack cracked open in the void. Boom! Suddenly, a blast exploded. Endless smoke filled it. Jian Wushuang slammed his sleeves and spread the smoke away. The next moment, he saw the original golden divine ball, which had turned black. This is. Jian Wushuang's eyes soared by 3 inches in the eyes, and his unshakable face couldn't help but burst of excitement. He reached out and touched the magic ball. Virtual force. This is virtual force. Jian Wushuang laughed out loud. Succeeded. Finally succeeded. He spent countless mental deductions, calculated the structural arrangement of divine power and virtual power, and then continued experimenting. Finally, he started with the divine power from the source and changed its structural mode to make it into virtual power. Then the next step is to transform all my divine power into virtual power. Jian's eyes twinkled, thinking quickly in his mind. As long as the first step is completed and a way to convert divine power into virtual power is found, then the divine power and virtual power will be transformed later, but it is just according to the original declaration and so on. Turn. Jian Wushuang whispered. In a moment, his whole body was as powerful as Wang Ruyang, and he changed as much as possible. Card tilde. The structure changes instantly and reorganizes. Jian Wushuang's body was up and down, the breath began to change dramatically. After a while, it's done. Jian Wushuang smiled slightly, now he has transformed all the power of the body into virtual power. Even if at this moment he exerts his magical powers and fights with people, he can never see that there is a trace of half power in his body. Of course, this is not to say that Jian Wushuang has really become a dummy. His spirit, his source of life, still comes from the divine universe. The next step is to break through the middle extreme. Jian Wushuang took a deep breath and never stopped doing anything. He planned to take this opportunity to break through the realm and rise to the highest level. Once he breaks through to the middle extreme, his strength will have a qualitative improvement. Missed double. Just when Jian Wushuang was about to make a breakthrough, a sudden voice sounded outside the door of the corpse hole. "Huh! Elder Wind Moose." Jian Wushuang raised an eyebrow, and then waved to remove the enchantment at the door of the corpse hole. Standing up, Sword Wu Shou swept to the door of the corpse hole. "Elder Wind." Jian Wushuang saluted him slightly. "Okay." Elder Moose nodded his head as a response, and then asked, "Mist Shuang, how can you adapt in the past few days? I heard that you and the chief disciple in the vein of Banshan, the Angry Bear conflict." Jian Wushuang heard the words and couldn't help but mute this Moose Wind Elder. "Is the news so well informed?" Nodded his head, Jian Wushuang opened his mouth and said, "Elder Huifeng's Moose Winds are just some minor contradictions that are harmless, so don't worry." "Well, that's fine." Elder Moose Wind nodded his head and smiled. "Mist Shuang, with your talent, in the future, we must be the dragon-like figures of Shenzong in the sky. We don't have to worry about those ordinary disciples. But, when you break through the trace level, this seat will recommend it to the suzerain, so that you can become an elder in our suzerain." "Thank you, Elder Moose." Jian Wushuang smiled slightly. "You don't need to be polite with this seat." Elder Moose shook his head and said with a smile, "Mist Shuang, this seat should have come over to pick you up to see the suzerain, but something happened temporarily, which delayed time. Well, now you take a walk with this seat. Lord Suzerain is curious about you." Chapter 4480. Alas. Jian Wushuang followed behind Elder Feng of the Moose, and quickly swept towards the highest peak of Lian Shenzong Mountain Gate. There, it is the place where the sovereign lord of refining God is located. According to Jian Wushuang's observations for more than 10 days, he can be considered to have clarified some of the strengths on the Ming side of Lianzong. Refining the emperor of the 8 sects of the sovereign, the 6-marked Shu Shi, corresponding to the divine power universe, is the invincible supreme. Under the 8 sects of the Emperor Shenzong, there are 5 elder elders. The 5 elder elders have reached the level of 4 marks even if they have the lowest cultivation. Under these 5 elders, there are nearly 20 ordinary traces of false men. This is the strength of the refining Shenzong on the bright side. If you compare it with the divine power universe, it's almost the same as the life shrine, but when you really count it, it's better than the life shrine. Because everyone who refined Shenzong, each person has a corpse that has the same strength as his own, so if converted, it is equivalent to double the number of false relics. In addition, Jian Wushuang's heart determined that there was definitely a more incredible power in this huge refining Shenzong. Jian Wushuang thought silently, and constantly compared the refining Shenzong with his own divine universe. Once the 2 universes are fully engaged in war, then the refining Shenzong will be afraid of a difficult bone. Led by Elder Moose Wind, the speed of both of them was fast. It didn't take long for them to swoop to the highest peak of Lian Shenzong. A palace formed by countless skeletons of Bai Sensen appeared in the eyes of Elder Jian Wushuang and Elk Wind. Countless faint yellow ghost fires float in the void, shining like fireflies. "Mist Shuang, Lord Sovereign is in it, go in with this seat." Elder Moose looked back and smiled at Jian Wushuang. "It is good." Jian Wushuang nodded his head. From the moment he stepped on the gate of the palace, He could vaguely feel that in the darkness, a pair of eyes were watching him hidden in the darkness. If you guessed right, these eyes want to be the lord of the refining deities. If the divine power has not been converted into virtual power, perhaps Jian Wushuang will still be quite worried, but he has now figured out the nature of divine power and virtual power, and the conversion is successful. He is confident that even if he has a pair of fire eyes and golden eyes, it will definitely can't see through his identity. Crunch! The two black iron gates of the sovereign's hall automatically opened inward, and Elder Moose Wind and Jian Wushuang strode in. The first purpose was the elders and elders standing on both sides of the hall, including the elder sickle. He saw Jian Wushuang walk into the hall, and suddenly there was a shadowy smile that was difficult to understand. At the top of the main hall, a majestic middle-aged man wearing a very long black robe with the corners of his clothes scattered on the ground, with raised eyes, sat on the main seat. You don't need to guess, this person is bound to be the master of this sacred Dalian sect, the Eight Desolate. Sovereign, the mists are here. Elder Moose Wind arched his hand at him, and then stepped into the sides and returned to the position. Disciple Wu Shuang, Sea Lord Suzerain. Jian Wushuang narrowed his eyes and immediately lowered his head and said in a loud voice, "Look up and look at me." A low, majestic voice came from the mouth of the master of the refining god. Yes. Jian Wushuang looked up. I saw the Lianshan sovereign stare at him with staring eyes, no expression on one face, no emotions. A mountain-like pressure suddenly radiated from him, like a mountain, pressing on Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang couldn't help sinking. Mist Shuang, my lord heard that when you came to participate in the selection of our mentor disciples, did you go with the three men halfway, right? The lord of the refining god spoke indifferently. Yes. Jian Wushuang nodded his head. He knew that the lord of the refining god was pinching him. In other words, the sovereign lord did not fully believe in his identity. Jian Wushuang couldn't help but twist his eyes slightly, glanced at him, and saw the elder Shenzyan, looking at him with a smile. The eyes of the two people couldn't help but be together. In an instant, Jian Wushuang understood it. I was afraid that it was the elder Shunxing who said something behind his back. Then do you know the identity of these three? The lord of the refining god asked again. The momentum pressed on Jian Wushuang's body suddenly became heavier. Unknown. Jian Wushuang took a deep breath and decided to return. Oh, really, or pretending not to know? The mouth of the refining ancestor slightly lifted up, and asked blandly, Master Sovereign, what do you have to say? Jian Wushuang raised his head, seriously, and said to the lord of the refining god. In the face of the rather powerful and overbearing eyes of the sovereign lord, Jian Wushuang's eyes were clear and not half-hearted. The lord of the refining god heard that his pupils shrank. You little guy is quite courageous. The refining god sovereign shook his head and continued to speak. Mist Shuang, that sovereign said straight away. Now the sovereign suspects that you are one with the three spies who want to enter the refining god sect. You can let this seat. Use soul search. Speaking of this sentence, in the eyes of the Lianshan sovereign, God's Mang suddenly surged 3 inches, staring at the sword unparalleled. The elder sickle had a playful expression on his face. Jian Wushuang heard the words, could not help sinking in his heart. The soul-searching technique also exists in the divine power universe, which is to directly enter the soul of the divine body through the large magic power, peek into the cause and effect, and clearly see the past and future. What dare you? Jian Wushuang quickly thought in his heart, but his mouth answered with a laugh. He knew that he must not be half cowardly. Once hesitant, he will only exacerbate the suspiciousness of the god sovereign and increase the risk of exposure. He can only bet. He bets on the god sovereign, he will never perform soul-searching on him. This technique is to forcibly glimpse the heavenly avenue, and it is extremely harmful to the person being treated. It can be said that it destroys the foundation of the road, and it is not unreasonable to break the future. And now, he is the rare superior qualification of the refining gods, and the master of the refining gods will never reverse the cause and effect and forcibly destroy this good seed because of an unspecified guess. Sure enough, as soon as this remark came to an end, before the refining monk spoke, he saw the elder Feng Mo stepped out, his face anxiously, Master Sovereign, this is absolutely necessary. Mist Shuang is our rare superb qualification for refining the Emperor Shenzong and refining the first corpse in our case. The future is limitless. If the soul-searching technique is forcibly used, it is equivalent to breaking his promotion path. The Sovereign Lord suddenly snorted and said, Elder Moose Wind, the higher the talent, the greater the harm. The three people who appeared outside the Shanmen selection on that day, should you be clearer than the Sovereign? Wu Shuang's misconceptions are from the same place as those three people. Then the millions of years of our universe have been leaked and damaged. Can you afford this responsibility? After finishing speaking, the Lord of the Lian Shun looked coldly at Xiongjian Wushuang and said, Mist Shuang, this matter is of great importance. There is no 1/10,000th risk, and it is blameless for the masters of this suzerain. The words fell, countless vain forces, and rallied in the hands of the master of the refining gods. Suddenly, Jian Wushuang's heart sank to the extreme. Chapter 4481, Escape? At this moment, thousands of thoughts flashed wildly in Jian Wushuang's mind. It is absolutely impossible for him to perform the soul-searching technique. Once he is allowed to perform, the things from the divine universe will be fully exposed. Although he is now transforming divine power into virtual power, the soul-searching technique goes straight into time and traces the deepest memories. This point is how Jian Wushuang can change, and it is absolutely impossible to change. Instead of exposing and being killed after performing soul search, it's better to retreat now. For a moment, Jian Wushuang's face remained calm, but his heart began to think back. If the two original supernatural powers of the primitive universe and life shock are directly applied, coupled with the mysterious skills such as dragon blood mysticism, when the explosion erupts in an instant, they will be caught off guard. Go out. And he also has a card called Divine Power Breakdown, which can confuse magic. However, in this way, it is equivalent to all the previous actions of Jian Wushuang, all of which failed, and the supreme corpse of Tai Luo will not be taken away. Misty Double, come on. Just when the Sovereign Lord is about to prepare for the soul search. Elder Banshan, one of the 5 elder elders, flashed his eyes slightly and suddenly said, Sect Master, Moosewind is right. This mist is a good seed for our refining Shenzong. With his talent, it will be inevitable in the future. Will be on an equal footing with me, if after the soul-searching, he is indeed the same person who is out of the same place with the three. If not, it is equivalent to us personally stifling the power of the future of our refining Shenzong. In this matter, I also ask Lord Suzerain to think twice. Jian Wushuang, who had already exploded far away, could not help but raise his eyebrows slightly, and looked towards the elder Banshan. I saw the elder Banshan nodded slightly towards him, and there was a flash of anomalous in the eyes that only the two sides of the sword could see. Okay. Jian Wushuang saw this, and could not help but tremble in his heart. Yeah. Lord Sovereign, can you test whether Wu Shuang and the three are from the same place, and there are more discernible ways? Why use the soul-searching technique? Elder Moose said quickly. The Lord of the Refining Gods heard that he could not help but flash a slight hesitation. It seemed to be thinking. After a while, the Lord of the Refining God nodded and said, well, just as the elders said. Mist Shuang, let's do this. You will release the weak force and let this suzerain watch. As soon as this remark was made, there was no expression on the other people's faces, but the elder Sickle burst into a smirk. He had inquired that Jian Wushuang had not really used virtual force since entering the refined God sect. Included in the library, conflicts with disciples of the Four Pulses, and confrontation with the Angry Bear, the use of physical power. It can be deduced from this that this fog double definitely has some reasons why it is impossible or dare not use virtual force. However, after just a breath, the smile on Elder Shensickle's face instantly freezes on his face. How can this be? I saw in the hall, Sword Wushuang spread out 5 fingers, in his palm, a group of black condensed by force, is constantly breeding distortion. The virtual force in it is pure to the extreme. Jian Wushuang's expression was indifferent, and he looked at the refining God Sovereign and said, Master Zong, do you think that's enough? In an instant, the expression of the Emperor of the refining God synced down, and the elder wind of Elder Wind flashed an unexpected color of satisfaction. Before that, he helped the sword unparalleled sword to the elder Banshan, and his eyes were a strange color. Seems to be quite surprised, Jian Wushuang released a weak force. Impossible. Absolutely impossible. There must be something weird in the middle. Just then, Elder Shenxian screamed. He stared hard at Jian Wushuang, his face full of gloom. Jian Wushuang looked at him with a bland expression, and said, Elder Shensickle, the disciples have offended you somehow. Since I was still participating in the introductory selection, you have been targeting me. The disciples remember that it seems that neither I nor you too many intersections. This soul-searching technique, I'm afraid you also suggested it to the Lord Sovereign. Elder Godsickle, my disciples are curious now, is it why the disciples offended you, or did I accidentally offend you? Interests that make you so hate me? As soon as this remark came to an end, the other elders seemed to be hindered by what they thought, and narrowed their eyes to look at Elder Godsickle's eyes, which became complicated. They could not help but think that the biological son of Elder Shenxian is now the chief disciple of the suzerain, and is now recognized as the first day of refining Shenzong. Before Jian Wushuang future refining Shenzong, the Elder Shenxian had proposed to the suzerain in the hall 3 or 5 times to have his son be appointed as the next suzerain of refining the suzerain. All of a sudden, thoughts flowed from the minds of many elders in the hall. And once this idea begins to take root in my mind, it will gradually sprout, grow stronger, and then go on. Mist Shuang, you talk nonsense. The Elder Sickle's face suddenly changed. He wanted to say more. Enough. Lian Shenzong Su looked at him coldly, and then looked at Jian Wushuang again, expressionless. Mist Shuang, you are a descendant of Zongmen, you must not frame the elders without any evidence. After a pause, the Lord of the Refining God continued, Wu Shuang, that's all for this time, but after Zongmen big match, there is a task that you need to perform, you must not refuse. Do you understand? Yes. Jian Wushuang nodded. Well, let's just go away. The Sovereign Lord regained his seat and closed his eyes. The 5 elders of the hall, and the elders, looked at each other, and then resigned. Mist Shuang, let's go. Elder Moose patted Jian Wushuang's shoulder and smiled. It is good. Jian Wushuang left with the Elder Wind Elder. Suddenly, the hall was quiet, and only Elder Shensickle left. He stared at Jian Wushuang's departed back, with extreme resentment in his eyes. Mist Shuang, you wait. Don't be too proud of yourself, this one will grab your feet sooner or later. The Elder Sickle rattled his teeth refining Shenzong. Jian Wushuang and the Moose Wind Elders fly in the air. Godsickle, it's getting too much. He thought that because he was a suzerain, even his disciples dare to bully. Elder Feng's face was particularly unsightly. The sword's eyes twinkled, and the Elder Shengxian's attack on him and the temptation of the Master of the Refining were all within his expectation, and it was no accident. It was the Elder Banshan's sudden words that surprised Jian Wushuang. In the midst, Jian Wushuang has a kind of intuition. This is too much for elders. I'm afraid it's not easy. Chapter 4482. This sickle is becoming more and more wanton. It seems that this is the time for this seat to find a chance to beat him. Elder Moose said. Jian Wushuang was thinking about the Elder Banshan too, and couldn't help but ask, Elder Mokfeng, what is the origin of this Elder Banshan? Is Banshan? After listening to the words, Elder Moose Feng thought for a moment, and then said, I don't know much about Elder Banshan. Although we are the elders of the 5 elder monks, Banshan has always been lonely, and we are extremely lonely. Deal less. Speaking of which, Elder Banshan has a longer history of refining Shenzong than me. It is said that before tens of thousands of chaos ages, the previous monarch returned from a remote forbidden area of the universe, and then Elder Banshan stayed in this refining Shenzong. There are tens of thousands of chaos periods, and no step has been taken. Speaking of Elder Banshan, the number of shots is also very small, but each shot is a thunder strike. I am afraid that it is not in this seat. Is that so? There was a flash of thought in Jian Wu's eyes, and for some reason there was a speculation in his heart. However, if this guess is correct, it will take time to verify. The two flew in the air while chatting, and soon reached the top of Shiyang Mountain, outside the corpse cave of Jian Wushuang. Wu Shuang, Zhong Nei will soon have a Zhongman disciple comparison. Would you like to participate? If you do, I will leave a place for you. Elder Wind asked. Jian Wushuang thought for a while, shook his head and replied, No, the disciples have recently realized something, but I am afraid that the breakthrough will soon occur. The suzerain master will have a task to be given to the disciples later. The disciples want to take advantage of this time to first prepare to ascend. A breakthrough? Elder Moose Wind immediately heard the words, and raised his palms and laughed. Okay, that's why it's important for you to break through the realm. As for this disciple, it's nothing more than a chance to show your strengths. Why do disciples have to compare themselves to prove themselves? After speaking, Elder Feng was afraid of disturbing Jian Wushuang's practice, and after a few more words, he left with a smile. Jian Wushuang sighed a little as he looked at the back of Elder Moose. In this refining deities, his impression of this Elder Wind Elder is quite good, but the two are inherently hostile camps. I am afraid that they will inevitably face each other on the battlefield outside the territory. Shaking his head, Jian Wushuang no longer thought deeply, striding into the corpse hole. In the main hall today, it was really thrilling, and there was a little difference, and I was afraid that it would cause death. If it wasn't for the Elder Banshan suddenly speaking at the last minute, I'm afraid that at this moment, he is either already killed in the hand of the refining Shenzong, or he is currently on the way to be pursued. Banshan. 10,000 epochs of chaos, returned by a former master from a remote forbidden zone rarely shot, withdrawn by nature. Jian Wushuang sat cross-legged on the stone bed, his eyes twinkled, and he kept pondering the description of Elder Mofeng's Elder Banshan. After a moment, Jian Wushuang shook his head. Even if his guess was true, he must not easily and recklessly recognize him before the Elder Banshan gave him a clear signal. Thinking of this, Jian Wushuang slowly closed his eyes, no longer thinking, and began to break through the middle extreme. In that moment, Jian Wushuang's whole body power was fully mobilized, like boiling water, and started to run frantically. In his body, there was a roar of bones like fried beans. Suck. Jian Wushuang opened his mouth and sucked, and suddenly the body seemed to turn into a huge vortex, swallowing a large amount of imaginary force, and then transformed, like a rolling wave, toward the barrier between the first and the middle supreme. A roaring explosion, like a thunderbolt on a sunny day, exploded in the corpse hole. In an instant, the entire Shiyang Mountain was aflash. This is still the situation where Jian Wushuang has set hundreds of suppressions or suppressions. Otherwise, just fearing the impact just now, a huge shock wave will be formed, which will blow up the entire Shiyang Mountain. What happened? Who is breaking through? Suddenly, in Xianshan's densely packed corpses, countless disciples who were condensing the corpses or devoted to spiritual practice all changed their faces and looted out of the corpses. The top of the mountain. It's a corpse hole on the top of the mountain. Someone is breaking through. I remember the 7 corpses on the top of the mountain, where several chief disciples lived. I haven't heard of any major disciples who want to break through recently. No, not the chief disciple, but Wu Shuang. Mist Shuang. Is that the one who has been rumored in Zhong Nei recently and has superior qualifications? Nice. Some time ago, Wu Shuang was brought back to Zhong by Elder Moose Wind and given him one of the 7 corpses on the top of the mountain. In the corpse hole of Jian Wushuang, there was another explosion. Suddenly, Xianshan shook even more intensely. I remember Wu Shuang seems to have only Samsung or 4-star strength, right? Why is his breakthrough so terrifying? Is this the superior qualification? Even the breakthrough is different from us. Want to be exceptional? Looking at it like this, I'm afraid it's not a breakthrough in a small realm. Well, I am afraid that when the fog double breaks through, the 5 chief disciples will not be able to sit still. I heard that some time ago, Jian Wushuang had a brief encounter with angry bears in Zangshuj. In one move, he defeated angry bears. In my opinion, there should be a good person who spreads the word through deliberate exaggeration. But it is also obvious from this that I am afraid that the strength of Wu Shuang is not weaker than those chief disciples. Well, Zhongmen disciples are much better this time, and I don't know if Wu Shuang will participate and what position will be impacted. A whispering voice came from the foot of Shiyang Mountain, and many disciples of refining Shenzong looked at the location of the peak sword Wu Shuang in surprise, and immediately opened a discussion. The voluptuous woman, named Nine Musk, is extremely graceful and uneven, and here too, she widens her beautiful eyes looking at the position of Jian Wushuang. How long has this guy come to refining Shenzong, and will he break through? Rumble tilde. At the top of the Lian Shenzong mountain, there was a rush of wind, and the wind was screaming wildly. Thunder continued to flash, reflecting the ghostly Lian Shenzong, bright as day. Swordless sat on the stone bed cross-legged, a powerful breath was released, and in his deity, an immense amount of divine power impacted the first barrier level and the last barrier level. If in the past, Jian Wushuang broke through, and he was also worried that the breath would leak out and be exposed by the power of the refining Shenzong. But now that he has turned all the divine power into virtual power, even if the refining suzerain came in person, he couldn't see the right or wrong. Like WN Dao Gen Zun, please collect WN Dao Gen Zun green beans update the fastest. Chapter 4483. Boom boom. Like the waves, the divine power in Jianshuang's body, like the turbulent rivers, rushed towards the barrier level that crossed the elementary and middle extremes. Wave after wave. Broken. Suddenly, Jian Wushuang's eyes opened, and there was a dazzling shunmang in his eyes. A mighty spirit, rising from Jian Wushuang's body. An extremely terrifying and sharp atmosphere, centered on Jian Wushuang, has skyrocketed. At this moment, Jian Wushuang's strength once again produced a leap. In just one breath, this breath was immediately withdrawn by Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang took a deep breath, stood up from the stone bed, and smirked at the corner of his mouth. Medium supreme, it's done. He can clearly feel that whether it is the strength of his divine power or the strength of his physical body, he is a lot stronger than before. If this is the improvement of the basic attributes, in addition to this, Jian Wushuang can more clearly feel that his fit with the Tiandi Avenue and his understanding of various supernatural powers have become clearer. It was as if a leaf with a barrier was removed, and the sword's unparalleled mind became rare and clear. Even between the feints, Jian Wushuang's heart also gave birth to a thought of creating a supernatural power. Stronger. There was a flash of enlightenment in Jian Wushuang's eyes. Now he is confident that if he meets Bingyu Supreme again, he will definitely be much easier to win, and he will not be forced to the point where he can't get caught. It can be said that as long as the invincible Supreme cannot be reached, his sword is unparalleled in the Supreme Divine Realm. In other words, even in this great refining God sect, as long as the Lord of the refining God sect does not come out, even if the 5 elders, the sword Wushuang only needs one sword in his hand, he is not afraid. It's time to improve our strength on the next level. The lights of Jian Wu's eyes flickered for a while, and then he was exposed to Samsung's virtual power, which doubled in an instant and skyrocketed to 6 stars. 6 stars, that is, invincible dominates the realm. Now, I just need to continually consolidate the corpse of Taro Supreme. If I can refine the corpse of Taro Supreme to the state of Supreme, I will join forces with the corpse of Taro Supreme. By then, the universe will be big, and I will where can't I get it? Jian Wushuang took a deep breath and began to think about the plan behind. Now that he has just broken through the middle supreme, if there is no opportunity to make a difference, if he wants to increase his strength to reach the high supreme, there is no hardship for hundreds of thousands of years, or even millions of years. Therefore, the fastest way to improve his strength before him is to refine Taro Supreme Corpse. After all, these two universes now seem calm, but the dark tide is already surging and storms are coming. No one knows when the big war between the two universes will erupt. Once the war breaks out, it can be said that the Supreme is like an ant, and it will fall at any time. There is no minimum high combat power, and even the qualification for admission is not. Therefore, Jian Wushuang must take advantage of the buffer period before the outbreak of the war to reach his peak strength. Only in this way can he have a hint of self-protection in this battle of mass calamity. Refine. Jian Wushuang didn't stop. After turning his thoughts, he took a deep breath, continued to sit down with his knees crossed, and began to refine Taro Supreme Corpse. A force of virtual force emerged from the hands of the sword, and then, like a thin needle, pierced into the body of Tai Luo Supreme, like Xiao Huoheng's tone, refining Tai Luo Supreme. At the foot of Shiyang Mountain. Many disciples were shocked, then walked out of the corpse cave, watching Shiyang Mountain's summit gradually returning to peace, staring at each other. Breakthrough? It seems that the fog double breaks through smoothly. I don't know what the state of Wu Shuang is now. Once he improves and breaks through, it is presumed that the night of his corpse will skyrocket. Ha ha ha, I'm already looking forward to it. Wu Shuang is on the Zhongmen disciples, and he looks like he became famous in World War I. Many disciples looked at the excitement and didn't think it was a big deal, smiling and discussing. In the other corpses at one of the 7 corpses on the top of Shiyang Mountain, the chief disciple Heixing Shusha, Zhengheng Shusha, Shenyang Shusha, and so on, became gloomy. They knew that this time the selection of beginner disciples, I was afraid they would be sprouting. At the same time, in the sovereign's dormitory far from Shiyang Mountain, the main disciple of the Lord's Pulse, Yang Dan, the elder of Shenzhen, was already meditating with his knees, and his eyelids jumped. The volatility caused by this breakthrough just now. In my father's mouth, is the super-qualified man Wu Shuang who made me try to kill everything? Interesting, it seems that the Zhongmen disciples have a big rival this time, and finally have an interesting opponent. Yang Dan sitting cross-legged in the dark, the corner of his mouth slowly pulled a smirk mist double. Super-qualified? Ha 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 ha, somebody finally can make me a desire to fight. Boom tilde. An 8-star breath spread from Yang Dan. Immediately, this breath is getting stronger and stronger, and it is violently impacting towards the Mark-level virtual soldier. For a while, because of Jian Wushuang's breakthrough, the situation that was originally dominated by disciples of Wu Mai became faint. Among the disciples of Lian Shenzong, there was a discussion about the word shuang shuang, which started to sound one after another. Time passed slowly, in a blink of an eye, 10 years passed. In the past 10 years, the sacred refining Shenzong has become even more lonely, and it is rare to see that there are disciples of the refining Shenzong walking outside. Everyone took a sigh of relief, retreating in their corpse hole, hoping that they could go one step further, or study the killer at the bottom of the box. What I did was I longed to be able to show my strength in the sky when compared with the upcoming Zhongmen disciples. This is related to their practice resources, status promotion, and so on, which are extremely important. Finally one day after 10 years, with the order of the Lord of the Refining God, Dizongmen Derby opened the curtain. For a while, the entire Lian Shenzong was boiling, and countless disciples who could not retreat for a long time came out of the dark corpse hole. Some of them are eager to try, and some wins are in their hands. Obviously, they have gained something in the retreat during this time, and many have a sad face and anxiety in their hearts. At the same time, on the same day that the news of Zhongmen disciples' derby came out, a similarly eye-catching news came out. In this decade, he was hailed as about to break the 5-pulse disciple-s dominance, and was killed halfway through. The most promising dark horse, Wu Shuang, refused to participate in the Zhongmen disciple contests. In a short time, countless expectation of Jian Wushuang disciples of Zhenzong who can show their strength, dazzled, their eyes startled. Wu Shuang even turned down the Zhongmen disciples. Chapter 4484. In the refining deities, as the priest-disciple derby approached, it became more and more lively. The 5 chief disciples, including some long-term retreats and lonely mysterious disciples, have all borne out of the corpse hole. Suddenly, the entire refining Shenzong was in full swing and the stars were shining. Theoretically, the focus of discussions at this time is usually those who have participated in the Zhongmen disciples and have the most popular candidates to win the championship. But this time, it was a little strange. Wu Shuang, why don't you want to participate in the Zhongmen disciples? Numerous disciples in the refining God sect were puzzled. At the same time, compared with the doubts of these ordinary disciples, the chief disciple of Wu Mai was quietly relieved. Only one person is the exception. In the refining deities, a side hall of the Lord's dormitory. The main disciple of the suzerain, Yang Dan, studied here. There were no candles in the room, and it was dim. Don't participate in haze. Yang Dan opened his eyes violently, and in his eyes, a hint of black mist poured out. In front of him, Elder Shensickle sat cross-legged, his expression cold. Father, the boy Wushuang didn't even participate in the big game, what should we do next? Yang Dan frowned. The elder Shen sickened with a somber face, and said, I didn't expect it for my father. The mister was such a chicken thief and directly rejected the Zhongmen big comparison. In this way, we were not very good at shooting him. Now. Yang Dan nodded when he heard the words, and couldn't help but ask with some doubts, Father, the baby is also very confused. Why does the father hate this mist double so deeply that he must kill him and then fast? Stupid, do this for your father, haven't you paved the way? When the elder Shenxian heard the words, he could not help but open his eyes and gave Yang Dan a glance. He sneered, this Wushuang is a rare superb qualification of all ages. Superb qualification, what is that concept? It can be said that Wushuang already has tickets for the 6-marker class. That's it. In the main hall that day, the Lord Sovereign wanted to perform soul-searching, but was discouraged by the 2 old guys, Ban Shan and Moose Wind, only to wait until the back of Wu Shuang if he wanted to compete for the supremacy. The 2 old guys, and Morphing, will help him. After a moment's pause, the elder Shen sickness glanced at Yang Dan and continued, if I don't try to kill him as a father now, do you think you have been able to fight for the title of supremacy? Baby, you remember, do everything for your father, but you want to clear the obstacles for you, and let you gradually become better. Elder Shensickle finally took a deep breath and said. Yang Dan couldn't help but smiled and replied casually, I thought my father you really suspect that Wu Shuang is from a different universe. This is one of the reasons. The elder Sickle nodded his head. Theoretically speaking, Jian Wushuang used virtual power and passed the test of the test bedrock. He should no longer doubt Jian Wushuang. But somehow, in the vagueness, he always felt that there was something wrong with Jian Wushuang. This is his intuition. After thinking for a while, Elder Shenxian shook his head and said, well, don't say this. Although Wu Shuang did not participate in the Zhongmen disciples this time, it does not mean that we have no way to take him. Father, what's the point, could we still have a chance to kill him? Yang Dan's eyes brightened, and he asked curiously. When I saw the elder Sickle smile at him mysteriously, Fusu said, that day, the Lord Sovereign was in the hall, and said that when the Zhongmen disciples ended, he would send Wu Shuang out to perform the task. The adult is definitely going to let Jian Wushuang go to explore the land of the gods. At that time, I will add a task quota to the suzerain, and this quota will naturally be you. When the refining Shenzong comes out, who can protect the boy in Wushuang? At that time, his life and death will not be controlled by you. Speaking of which, the elder Sickle's eyes shone coldly. Master Father has done a great job. Yang Dan heard a loud laugh and immediately chuckled. At that time, the mists will die one by one. When the current sovereign lord abdicates, is this refining Shenzong the world of our father and son? The sister-in-law can teach. Elder Shenxian nodded with satisfaction, and said, baby, Lord Suzerain is pretty good to you. When you really become suzerain, don't let your villain get your way, just as much respect for the current suzerain. Understand? Baby knows well. The 2 looked at each other and had begun imagining in their minds, waiting for the scene of the suzerain. After 3 days. After the speech of the refining suzerain, and then under the auspices of the elders of the 5 elder monks, Zhongmen disciples, Darby, officially opened the curtain. The competition officially started, and the eyes of all the disciples of refining gods were all put on the competition. Naturally, no one paid attention to Jian Wushuang. The whole refining Shenzong, a warm color. Countless disciples burst into the air and made their mark in the game. The 5 leading disciples who won the championship are each like a dragon in the sky. As soon as Fang played, he immediately attracted everyone's attention and showed his magical powers. Xianshan became lonely. On this day, an enchanting Qian Ying swept up from the foot of the mountain and flew straight to the top of the mountain. This guy, why are you still retreating? Jumu muttered, shook her head and said. After that day, Jian Wushuang met the suzerain and returned to Shiyang Mountain. He has been in retreat as if out of step with the lively world outside. With a sigh, Jusu originally raised her arm, put down her hand that wanted to knock on the door, and turned away. And at this moment, in the corpse hole of Jian Wushuang, refine. The sword sat cross-legged, with a dignified expression, and sweat dripped from his forehead. In front of him, Tai Luo's supreme corpse was quietly suspended, and an invisible flame composed of divine power spread and burned in him. A sense of effort flowing from the corpse of the Supreme Lord of Gods continued to become strong in Jian Wushuang's body. In the midst, Jian Wushuang felt that he had become Tai Luo Supreme, able to control everything of Tai Luo Supreme. Boom boom. Under the burning of this divine fire, the breath on Taro's supreme corpse became stronger and stronger. The most critical time is here. Jian Wushuang took a deep breath and his face sank. The flame on the corpse of Taro Supreme suddenly became more and more turbulent. Tai Luo Supreme God's corpse will return to Supreme Realm immediately. Once Taylor Supreme's corpse is restored to the Supreme Realm, Jian Wushuang's strength will be epically strengthened again. Jian Wushuang is confident. As long as he controls the Taro Supreme corpse that restores the Supreme Divine Realm, plus the self-cultivation now, it is absolutely enough to sweep all enemies under the Supreme. The existence of such old monsters as the ancestors and the Supreme monsters, Jian Wushuang also dare to pinch his wrist. Chapter 4485. Alas! Inside the corpse cave, the sound of invisible divine fire burning the void constantly sounded. Jian Wushuang's expression was calm, carefully controlling the fire of God, 1 inch by 1 refinement of Taro's supreme corpse. Under this refining, Jian Wushuang only felt that he was becoming more and more proficient in controlling the body of Tai Luo Supreme, as if his body was transformed into his second incarnation. Broken. The next moment, Jian Wushuang opened his mouth and drank. The voice fell, and the eyes of Taro Supreme God, who had closed his eyes and hovered quietly in front of him, opened his eyes suddenly. A sharp to the extreme Shen Mang burst out from the eyes of Tai Luo Supreme. Howl tilde. A terrifying roar sounded from the mouth of Tai Luo Supreme, forming a rolling sound wave, sweeping in all directions. The next moment, Tai Luo stood up suddenly, opened his mouth and directly sucked the mysterious flames of divine power, like the killer whale swallowing water, and sucked the endless flames into his belly. In that room, Taylor Supreme exudes intense golden light. His body kept ringing like a sledgehammer drumming. Click. The next moment, Taro Supreme's unpretentious atmosphere began to skyrocket. The key time is here. Jian Wushuang stared at the dead body of Tai Luo Supreme. Whether Tai Luo Supreme can recover to Supreme Shuowei depends on now. Black Wings, win. Zhangheng, win. Furious Bear, win. Yang Dan, win. As the game goes further and further, it becomes more intense. Everyone's thoughts were all attracted to this contest. No one pays attention to Jian Wushuang anymore. The word missed double seems to be abandoned in a corner. The most commendable match is the 5 chief disciples headed by Yang Dan. The strength of these 5 people is obviously a lot stronger than that of the same level of disciples. When they are fighting, they are crushed by force. Don't mess with water. Besides that, a rookie named Fu Chen was born out of nowhere and rose strongly. This person is also one of the superb qualifications that have arrived during this introductory selection. He should have attracted much attention before, but he was under the limelight by Jian Wushuang's unqualified qualifications some time ago, leading to some disclaimer. However, in this contest, he thoroughly demonstrated his strength, soaring into the sky, losing his opponent in a row. In the later stage of Zhongmen University, he defeated the 2 chief disciples of Black Wing and Shenyang and met Yang Dan in the finals. Everyone is saying that Fuchen Shusha is the strongest disciple solicited by Lian Shenzong this time, and this is a real dark horse. After watching the battle of Fu Chen, the master of the refining gods even spoke in person and praised him. This makes the rookie, who is already in the limelight, completely clean. After 3 days, The decisive battle begins. Sun Fuchen and Yang Dan fought over 9 days. This battle has caught everyone's attention. Countless people are waiting for it, want to see who will win the championship in the end. This battle lasted a whole day. The aftermath of the encounter between the two was actually a vision of heaven and earth. The billowing black smoke, like a tide, rolled up and covered the clouds. The rookie called Fu Chen is indeed strong. When he got to the back, he forced Yang Dan to play the strongest hole card. Shi Yang Dan broke through. On his left shoulder, the 8 stars representing invincible dominance disappeared, and a long mark twisted and spawned. Shi Yang Dan, promoted to the rank of virtual honor, Sun Fuchen was filmed for 9 days by his palm. Yang Dan stood alone for 9 days. Wanzhong Xiaoguang served as his background. The sun and the moon formed around the whole body, like the Ling Chen. Take Tiandi Avenue and crown him. He stepped down from the 9-day cloud step by step, like a new king ascended the throne, unparalleled in the world. This sect door comparison, Yang Dan won the championship, and closed the curtain. After Barber Tai was over, the emperor of the religious sect, Bag Shuzun, ordered and celebrated all the disciples, so that all the disciples would go outside the sovereign hall to start the banquet. Including disciples who did not participate in the Zongmen Debi Oishi Rock Mountain, inside the corpse where Jian Wushuang is located. It's done. Wu Jianshu's face was slightly pale, and his eyes were weak. When the mortal body of Taro Supreme resumed his first supreme practice, the moment of breakthrough directly drained all his divine power. When he saw the quietly standing in front of him, the exalted Taro Supreme with sword-like breath, the sword's mouth could not help but reveal a smile. The corpse of Tai Tai Supreme has finally recovered to the supreme practice. The sword Wushuang has soared a great deal of strength, and suddenly it is even more powerful, and the strength once again has a leap. Don't look at Tai Luo Supreme just restored to the elementary supreme practice, less than 1/10 of his heyday, but Rao has been able to crush a large group of people in the supreme realm. Shu took a deep breath, and the smile on Jian Wushuang's mouth gradually closed, and he began to recover his spirit. At this moment, a clear and majestic voice blasted loudly in the sky of Lian Shenzong, and directly passed into the ears of all Lian Shenzong. The end of the Zongmen Big Match. All the disciples of the Refining God sect will go to the Sovereign Hall to host a banquet at tomorrow morning. Wu Jianshuang heard the words and closed his eyes for a moment, and then he remembered that there is still a case of Zongmen disciples. I was not able to participate, and Jian Wushuang did not have any regrets. For him now, the so-called Zongmen disciples are much better than others, but Jian Wushuang has no interest in even raising a trace of interest. Close your eyes. Sword warriors begin to recover again on the 2nd day, the hour is full. Wu Jianwu opened his eyes and stood up, left the corpse hole, and swept towards the sovereign hall. Wu Tailuo's supreme corpse put on a black robe, closed his eyes tightly, like the same shadow, followed behind Jian Wushuang. From the sky, countless disciples transformed into gods flying from all directions to the sovereign hall. Oh! Isn't this misty? Is it finally closed? Hey, I was still looking forward to what rankings Wushuang can achieve in the Zongmen competition, but it was a pity that Wushuang did not participate directly. In my opinion, it is wise for Wushuang to fail to participate in Zongmen. Otherwise, in case of poor performance, wouldn't it be a shame for her to have an outstanding qualification? Yes, in the event of a poor double performance, you will be defeated as soon as you enter. Isn't it embarrassing then? A whispered discussion sounded. The angry bear was also in it, but he did not speak, but looked at Xiong Jian Wushuang, which was quite complicated. He had a brief encounter with Jian Wushuang, so only he knew how frightening Jian Wushuang was. The sword has no 2 sides and no expression, as if ignoring it, swept away towards the Lord's Hall. Immediately before reaching the Sovereign's Hall, a clear voice suddenly sounded. Mist Double Master. Immediately, I saw a shadow of Qian, flying from behind, and soon stood beside Jian Wushuang. Sister Nine Musk. Wu Jianshou turned his head back, his eyebrows slightly raised, his eyes flashed with astonishment. 9 Musk today, something is wrong. Chapter 4486. The Jew Musk landed next to Jen Wushuang in one step, her undulating slightly. She wore a tight red gauze and a phoenix crown, making her already bumpy figure even more charming. Master Wushuang, have you finally made it through? Yang Ju smiled and looked at Jen Wushuang with a smile, and then his heart jumped suddenly, his eyes gradually appearing suspicious. Mist Shuang, have you broken through to 8 stars? Well, just fortunate. Wu Zhenshuang smiled at her. Okay. No wonder I didn't participate in this Zhongman disciples comparison, and I dared to break through the realm. Ju Jimu stretched out her pink fist, and gently stabbed Jen Wushuang's chest, urging a narrow smile. Oh, don't say this. Sister Joshu, look at your dress, are you going to get married? Yang Jen Wushuang spoke sharply. As soon as this remark came to an end, Ju Shishong still had a cheerful and pretty face, and she immediately stepped down and sighed. Yes, the Lord Sovereign has already made his own claim and assigned me to others to become a lover. Oh, who is so blessed to be able to marry Sister Joshan? Wu Zhenshou said with a raised eyebrow. Ju Shi heard nothing, but looked up and looked at the ancestral hall in the distance. He said, this person you should have heard, the son of Elder Shen Sickle, is also the chief disciple of today's Lord. It is he who personally proposes to the Lord Sovereign and wants to become an acquaintance with me. When Ji said this, Joshan looked lonely, and seemed unwilling in his heart. Yang Dan? Wu Zhenshuang frowned. He had not heard of this person, but the identity of the elder of Shenzhen made Jen Wushuang uneasy. This Yang Dan is the son of the Elder Sickle, the chief disciple of the suzerain, and the champion of this sectarian disciple. It can be described as a stunning background, talent, and all the honors in the world. You can be married to her, and you should be happy. How can you be sad, don't you like it? Wu Zhenshou shook his head and asked at will. Yes. Wu Jusi nodded and replied, Yang Dan is too arrogant and doesn't put anyone in his eyes. He likes to gang up and behave in a domineering manner. I really don't like him. After uttering a long and short sigh, Wu Jusi sighed suddenly in his eyes. In this world of strength, if the strength is shallow and no talent, even if the skin looks good-looking, it is just a chess piece controlled by others. She looked at Jen Wushuang, and suddenly a thought flashed through her mind like electricity. Mist double. I have a way. I saw her pair of beautiful eyes glowing with light, and then she immediately held the arm of Jen Wushuang, her expression excited. Mist Shuang, can you help me once? With your talent, she is no longer under Yangdan, and again with the elders of Taishang Moose, as long as you wait to say at the big banquet, you and I have long been privately set for life. Presumably the Lord Suzerain will never embarrass me again. What do you think? Okay. Yang Jian Wushuang frowned, and he refused. I was joking, but he came to refining Shenzong as an undercover agent. What is it to start a family here? What's more, from the beginning to the present, his heart was only cold and frosty, and he could not tolerate others in the early days. It seemed to see the rejection of Jen Wushuang, and Jushi quickly said, Master Wushuang, of course, what I said just now does not mean that you really want to set a lifelong relationship with my sister and me, but to deal with the Lord Sovereign, wait here if it happens, I must not be entangled in you. You can rest assured. No. Wu Zhen shook his head. Although his tone was not tepid, it was full of unquestionable taste. This matter will be discussed again. The chanting voice fell, and Jen Wushuang no longer cared about her, stepping on it, and suddenly stepped on the air in the void, rushing towards the Lord's Hall. Looking at the back of Jen Wushuang, who was leaving like a flea, the Nine Musk couldn't help but stunned, and then a look of shame appeared on his pretty face. She first glanced down at her proud twin peaks, and then looked at her long and straight white legs, stomping her feet angrily. Damn! Alas! Wu Zhen stepped out without a step, which is the distance. Refining the land and mountains of Shenzong seems to shrink at his feet. Soon, Jen Wushuang arrived at the Sovereign Hall. There is a square of hundreds of miles outside the Lord's Hall. The banquet was held in this square. At this moment, this originally quite spacious square was already filled with disciples of the Shenzong sect, and everyone sat down in their seats. Seeing Jen Wushuang's arrival, many disciples of refining Shenzong all stared at him, and their pupils suddenly shrank. Fog is here. Finally willing to show up. The man in the black robe behind Wu Shuang is the corpse of his god, right? It doesn't seem to be that bad. Wait. You see, Wu Shuang seems to have broken into 8 stars. 8 stars? Hissed Tilda. How is that possible? Didn't he hear that he was only 4 stars when he entered the school? I'm afraid that Wu Shuang did not participate in the entry disciplinary contest, not because of fear of losing his reputation, but because he was anxious to break through. He whispered, "Mist Shuang, come here." At the forefront of the square, Elder Moose noticed Jian Wushuang, and suddenly waved his hand toward Zhao Wushuang. Yes. Wu Jian Wushuang nodded his head, and strode toward the Elder Wind Elder. Hey! 8 stars. Not bad. It's worthy of being a qualified person. The speed of such breakthrough is unheard of. Elder Mufeng stroked his palm and smiled. Next to Elder Moose Wind, there are 4 other elders. This elder, Jian Wushuang, has seen them with the Sovereign Hall, so it is no stranger to them, greeting them one by one. Behind the 4 elders, the 4 chief disciples, such as Black Wing and Fury Bear, stood like him. The Black Wings, Zhang Heng and others looked at Jian Wushuang up and down. His heart was slightly surprised, but there was no fluctuation on his face. It was only 8 stars, but it was just at the same starting line with them. Shi Wei was angry, the pupils shrank sharply in his eyes, and a chill grew in his heart. I don't know why, he can feel keenly that the sense of oppression and threat brought by Jian Wushuang even more. Before the sword Wushuang, it was like a fog, so that he could not see through it, but the current sword Wushuang is like a thunderous thug that hides behind a thick dark cloud. It has no prestige, but once you start, you will be shocked. The angry bear couldn't help lowering his head, deepening his jealousy of Jian Wushuang. Banquet, open. With a long tune, refining the Emperor sect's octogenarian Emperor Baji, he slowly walked out of the Lord's Hall. He was next to him. Yang Dan was slightly behind by half a figure, with a respectful expression, and followed step by step. The banquet started. Chapter 4487. Noisy on the square outside the main hall of the Emperor Zhuan. As the refining suzerain and Yang Dan walked out of the hall, the noisy square suddenly became quiet. Everyone looked at Yang Dan, who was half behind him, and his pupils shrank slightly. The Lord Sovereign brought Yang Dan alone to the banquet. I am afraid that the next sovereign person, Ji is not far away from 10, is brother Yang Dan. Everyone looked at each other and thought so. Qi Yangdan walked behind the 8-pole virtual emperor, and raised his head to glance at the crowd, his face full of pride. Of course, he also has this proud capital, not only a supreme father, but also a close disciple of the 6-marked virtual respect, and at the same time he has broken through the mark level, and in the virtual universe, is a rare talent. That person is Wu Shuang? Ji Yangdan looked around, then fell on Jian Wushuang's face behind Elder Moose Wind. 8 stars. Not bad, no wonder my father wanted to kill him. If he were allowed to grow, he might one day threaten my status. A sneer whispered secretly in Yang's heart. Yang Dan's eyes continued to turn, and landed on Ju Mu's face, and there was a flash of surprise in his eyes. I have to say that the 9 musk is indeed beautiful, even if it is placed among the major saints and goddesses. It is also the most outstanding pearl that stands out from the crowd. Today, she is wearing a red tight corset long skirt and wearing a phoenix crown, and she looks like the unsuccessful fire-saddling auntie. She adds a little coolness to the charm between her eyebrows and eyebrows. Wu Jusi also noticed the evilness in Yang Dan's eyes, and she couldn't help but look cold, and lowered her head to not look at him. Ill wait, see suzerain Tilda. After a few moments, thousands of disciples of refining God sect were kneeling on their knees, and their voices went straight to Zhou Xiao. No need to be polite today. Shu Baji nodded with satisfaction and looked at the disciples beneath him. A smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. This is the mainstay of the future of refining Shenzhou. The banquet began, and everyone pushed a cup for a change, just happy. The atmosphere immediately warmed up. After drinking wine for more than half a round, the first master of the refining who sat down put down the wine glass, and said with a smile at the corner of his mouth, "The banquet is held today because of 3 joys. The first joy is this time of the Zongmen disciples. This sovereign sees that the superior descendants in our refining deities are outstanding and heart-centered. With your presence, why do we worry about growing up? Decline. The second joy is to congratulate the great disciple Yang Dan, the closed disciple of this suzerain, who finally completed the avenue, breaking through the mark, and adding another for our refining Shunzo. The road to the future must shine. The third happiness is also related to Yang Dan. This suzerain announced that he would distribute the moon disciple Ju Mu to Shu Yang to his suzime Yang Dan. From then on, the two became partners and supported each other. After the Lord of the Refining finished speaking, there was a sound of approbation in the crowd. The Refining saw the slight jaw head, and then looked at Ju Mu. I saw Joshin lowering her head, biting her lower lip tightly, and clasping her long skirt with uneasy hands. There was a little joy on her face. When I saw this scene, the face of the Refining monarch was originally smiling and pulled down slowly. 9 Musk, don't you kneel down and thank the Prince Shu for your good marriage? You can be married to Yang Dan. It is a blessing that you have repaired in the 3rd century. Do hurry to thank you. Elder Lan Lan paid attention to the face of Lianshan's sovereign, and suddenly he drank softly when he saw this. Lan Yeye is the only female elder among the 5 elder elders and the lowest elder among the 5 elder elders. Yang Ming's eyes can be seen, Yang Dan breaks through the mark, and the future will be limitless. If there is no accident, it is already the next master's choice. If it is not necessary, Lan Yu really does not want to offend Yang Dan. 9 Musk was unmoved. What do you want, girl? Suddenly, when she saw the moon, her face suddenly turned. 9 Musk head is deeper. She bit her lower lip and seemed to be making a decision. Next moment, she lifted her head and said categorically, Elder Lan Yu, Lord Sovereign, I don't want to marry Yang Dan. As soon as this remark came to an end, there was an uproar in the audience. The expression of Elder Lan Yeye became instantly green, and the master of the refining was ugly. He didn't expect that an ordinary disciple in the Josie district refining Shunzong dared to violate his order. Suddenly, Yang Dan, the original smile on her face, slowly solidified. Slap. This is hitting his face in front of the whole refining Shunzong. Presumptuous. Master Lian Shunzong patted the armrest of the seat with his right hand, and a moment of pressure was released, pressing toward Ju Mu. What is the practice of the Divine Master? Liu Chen Xuanzuan, set up the gigantic arm of the top of the entire virtual universe. And Ju Mu is just a star-like virgin who has not even entered the mark. How can he resist this coercion? Suddenly, Ju Mu fell to her knees, her face pale. If you do not control the strength of the coercion carefully, then the fear of this coercion will crush her into a fan powder. I ask you, why don't you want to be married to my son? Elder Falcon Sickle also scolded with a somber face beside him. Wu Ju shuddered, raised his head hard, clenched his teeth and said, Elder Huishan Sickle and Lord Tilda www.mtl Novelle. It's not that Joshin doesn't want to become a mate with brother Yangdan, but Joshin already has his own heart, and set a private life with him. As soon as this sentence came out, the whole house was uproar again. Countless people looked at each other. Who does not know that Jomu has been regarded as a prisoner by Yang Dan in the refining deities? Who dares to grab Yang Dan's woman? Bad. I ask you, who is the one who has set you for life privately? Qi Yang Dan yelled, his face was already a little bit sullen, his eyes flashed wildly. The Lord of the Refining God frowned. Yes, yes. Yang Jia's eyes shivered and looked behind the elders of Elk Wind, with an expressionless expression, regardless of her lifeless swordsman, and gritted his teeth and said, It's Master Wu Shuang. After she said that, she lowered her head, dared not to look at the crowd anymore, and did not dare to face Jian Wushuang's eyes. What? Is it Misty Double? No wonder I was a big disciple in Zongmen before. Wu Shuang did not participate, and Joshin did not participate. It turned out to be for some reason. When the disciples of Zongmen were comparing, I saw it several times. Jojo went to the top of Shiyang Mountain. I was also curious about what Jojo was living under Shiyang Mountain and went to the top of the mountain. Now I want to come, I'm afraid to go to the fog double. Suddenly, the entire square fell into a short silence, and then it boiled up. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.